My name is Jess, and thank you for joining what is now the 11th workshop in a series of workshops hosted by the Social Impact Hub as part of the RISE program, which is supported by Westpac Foundation and the Paul Ramsay Foundation. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. For me, that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, as well as extending that more broadly, acknowledging collectively we're dialing in from a range of locations today. So my name's Jess again, and alongside my colleague Rob, who is on leave today, and the broader team at the Social Impact Hub, we had a privilege of working alongside a range of fantastic people and organisations in the for-purpose sector in developing this workshop series. But before we dive in, we've just got some online housekeeping. So please keep yourself on mute. If you have a question or comment, please use the chat function. We'd love to make this as interactive as possible for you. And also, please turn on your camera where possible so we can make this session as interactive as possible. We'll have breakout rooms and worksheets, and it'll be a fun session together. If you have any tech challenges, just feel free to private message me, and we'll do our best to help you out. But otherwise, that's everything for myself. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Tim, our facilitator for today. Tim is joining on the screen now, who will take us through today's sessions on technology trends for social enterprises. So over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Jess. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, just. By means of introduction, I'm one of the Professional Impact Network consultants with the Social Impact Hub, and this is the second session in a series of talks around, or workshops around, technology and how technology can help sustain and elevate impact for social enterprises. This session is designed to be highly collaborative, so it's really going to be up to you guys how and where we go through the next 90 minutes. Really I'm here to facilitate a conversation around technology and trends in order to help benefit you and your organizations. So the first thing I'd like to do is just kick off a brief introduction session. So with Jess's help, we're going to throw you out into breakout pairs, just to introduce yourself to somebody else in the room, and then come back, and then we'll kick off with a baseline understanding around where emerging technology sits within not-for-profits and social enterprises in Australia. And then I'll introduce you to the agenda and the rest of the session. So Jess, if we can kick off the breakout rooms, we will do the introductions now. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. So just give me 1 sec while I get that organized.
While Jess is doing that, there are 3 questions I'd like you to introduce to your partner. Where are you joining us from across Australia? The area of passion, purpose, or impact that you're focused on in your particular enterprise, and maybe one of the 5 or 6 areas that best describe you. Are you you have an idea for an enterprise? Are you an existing founder? Do you already work in an enterprise for a startup or social enterprise, not-for-profit, that sort of thing? Do you support the ecosystem within that particular area? Sorry, the list is gone, so I can't read it now. Are you an investor or do you study? So.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. So I will now open all of the breakout rooms. Here we go. Welcome back, everyone.
There we go. I think everyone's back. That always goes very, very quickly whenever I do that. So hopefully you got introduced to somebody you haven't met before, and you're able to extend the welcome to this session. I should have said in the introduction that these slides will be made available later on, as will a replay. So be sure to be fully engaged, because you'll be able to catch up with some of that stuff offline later. Okay, so what I'd like to do in this first section of this workshop really is to do a bit of a recap around the state of play of emerging technology within Australia, among the not-for-profit sector and social enterprises in Australia. Really just a set of foundation of change and where we currently are. And then really that will lay a baseline for the rest of the session later on. I'd also like to spend a bit of time talking about the difference between technology hype and technology adoption. You might be aware of the phrase chasing shiny things, and I want to try and share some structure and understanding about how you distinguish between those two. Towards the end of the session, I'd like to share some information around mapping innovation and technology innovation to SDGs, because I think there's some interesting framework material there that might be of interest to this audience. And then towards the end of the session, in order to help you take away something to inject or instill in your own organizations around developing a technology plan, or the initial components of a technology plan for you to be able to go and elevate strategy to be able to sustain impact and increase your impact. So let's kick off with a bit of a foundational couple of minutes. This will probably take 5 minutes, this section, really to talk about the baseline of where we are today within Australia. So let me just get out of the way. I'd like to use this model, which the corporate sector have been using for several decades, around volatility and change. And really that we're no stranger to this after the year 2020 and the amount of uncertainty and volatility that we experienced. But this is a situation normal for all of us. And we need to make sure that when we're developing solutions and strategies and plans, that we need to have a degree of flexibility and adaptability built in to make sure that we can cope and sustain. Last year, particularly in the areas of healthcare, retail, education and logistics, up to about 10 years worth of equivalent change was experienced within those sectors. And that is just within the first 6 months of last year, particularly in areas around web presence or HR systems where people are working from home and being more flexible and mobile in where they're working. But that should be really setting the baseline for where we're going forward in the future. Now, in my previous workshop, I referred to this slide, and it's a survey conducted amongst 490 not-for-profits in Australia and New Zealand last September. And the figure I'd really like to draw your attention to, because we're going to talk a lot more about this in this session, is the emerging technologies. 52% of the 490 not-for-profits in Australia and New Zealand were using some component of emerging technologies. So let's just explore that area. When I first saw this figure, I thought that 52% was quite high until I understood what was actually going on underneath the number. Now, if you were using any of these technologies, you would have appeared as an organization that was using emerging tech. Now, some of these aren't necessarily what I'd consider bleeding edge. So, for example, bulk SMS is actually something that's been around for quite a long time. But there are some relatively new areas of technology around analytics and AI and maybe virtual and augmented reality. And an area around Internet of Things, which is coming to the fore. So I referred to this model in my previous talk, but I want to reiterate it because there are probably a number of people on this call that haven't or may not have seen this before. This is a model I've borrowed from future thinkers who actually they're professionals in the space who really develop structures and methodologies around thinking about the future and alternative options and pathways. Now, what I love about this model is it really supports and encourages the importance of ridiculous ideas. There are actually some benefits in having slightly outlandish ideas. And the way the model works is essentially you're born at the point on the far left, and today's date is the grey straight line in the middle. And your life or your organization has taken a certain path to get to where it is today, but there were many other alternative pathways that could have been used or benefited from to get to there. And conversely, if you look at the future, there are many alternative pathways that could open up to you and your organization to either benefit from or to make sure that you don't experience, because they have a negative connotation. So the phrase "imagine the past, remember the future" is probably a good one to think about. And the final point there really is that today is the slowest rate of change we're going to experience. So things are only going to speed up from here. What I'd like you to do now, with Jess's help, is to break out into rooms again. Here we go again. Again for 5 minutes. So in groups of 2 or 3, I'd like you to answer 2 questions. What does emerging technology mean for me? And why is new technology important to me and my enterprise? When you come back to the main room, we'll open it up for conversation to see what conversation there is in the room and what hot topics and themes emerge. So, Jess?
Yep, no worries. Thanks, Tim. I'll open the rooms now.
Welcome back, everyone. That always goes really quickly again. So 5 minutes, I'm always surprised how quickly that time goes. What I'd like to do is just go round the rooms. We had 4 rooms in session there, so I've got a jot of the names. So would anyone like to come back and contribute to the group what they kind of discussed, the what and the why of technology? Do we have any takers? If you come off mute and take your camera off, then you can come and join the session. If not, I'll pick on some rooms. Zena, there you go.
Yes, happy to talk. I was just about to say happy to talk. Hi, Tim. In our group, we talked about, I guess our emerging technology was very different from person to person. We had Candace, who talked about looking at emerging technology from a perspective of big data and how to create meaningful insights from the data when the, I guess, skill necessarily doesn't exist in the organization. And we also had Chloe, who talked about having access to so much different technology, emerging technology on a weekly basis, and not knowing which one to choose and not having enough time to implement, and knowing how to know if the technology that's suitable today is going to be suitable tomorrow. From my perspective, I was looking at this moment in time, looking at how the new and emerging sort of technology that's coming on the market from a collaboration perspective could help us in this new way of working to ensure, from a cultural perspective, and to ensure that collaboration continues. Also looking at, new technology that's helping us with the way we work. Yeah, we didn't discuss the whys, to be honest.
No, that's all right. That's a lot there already in 5 minutes. You had a very productive 5 minutes. Excellent. Thanks, Zena. And Zena, a little plug there from the Good Things Foundation. Room 4. So who's this? This is Jane, Renee, and Bunarath, is it?
Yeah, Bunarath from Cambodia.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
What did your room talk about emerging technology, the what and the why?
Okay, yeah. So everyone in the room view technology as the opportunity for empowerment and for social inclusion. So that connects to the why, which means it is really important for us to apply in our social development field, especially in my country, which is a poor country, and not everyone can equally access to education or to other economic activity and other opportunity. So technology can provide a platform that people can access, especially the poor and women and young people in the rural area. But we still have one challenge in terms of connection to the internet across the country. So not every place can be connected to the internet, but smartphone is available in our country. Yeah.
Thank you, Bonara. That's excellent. No, okay, room 2, Miria and Michelle. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Mia had to step away, but I made some notes myself
That's good.
about it being related to big data and predictive technologies, as well as inclusion and accessibility being really important factors of new technology.
Excellent. What I love about that, so 2 rooms talked about data, and I've come prepared to talk about data, so that's fantastic. So what I'd like to do now with Jess's help is really to go over to a poll. Now this is kind of how I run these sessions, really to throw the opportunity over to you. I have 6 topics I'd love to talk about today. I will skate over in brief detail some of the other ones. But if you look at these 6 topics, let me just get out of the way and make this bigger. If you only get to choose one today, which one do you want to make sure that I really cover in a good amount of detail and depth to make sure that, here we go. So the poll's open. So if you can just choose, unfortunately, we can only choose one of them. But if you do have fear of missing out, I will kind of cover some of the other topics. Is that's the answer? Is it 62% on harnessing an emerging tech to scale and sustain impact? Okay, so right, the SDGs and the most innovative companies, that will be a very quick fly past. Okay, excellent. Right, thank you for that. Whenever you're choosing and selecting technology to help elevate and sustain your impact, it's very important that you have a plan to ensure that your technology and your overall business or enterprise strategy has a degree of alignment. You need to make sure that your technology of choice is supporting and contributing towards the overall objectives of your organization. And the graphic here really just says, it sounds quite simple. If you don't know where you're going, you certainly need a roadmap to get there. And it's very important that you do. So chasing shiny things or just adopting technology for technology's sake isn't necessarily going to contribute towards your overall objectives. Now, in order to help you as a group, what I'd like to do now, again, we're going to break out into groups, this time 3 groups for 10 minutes, and we're going to start talking about how to select certain technologies to support certain objectives within the organization. I'm going to suggest that, so normally there are 5 topics here that we choose. I'm just trying to think. Information systems, digital marketing, and IT management. I think those 3, Jess, are probably the topics we ought to do. And then the idea is when we come back, there is a PDF file that Jess will put into the chat that you need to all download, so you have access to that. If you look at that PDF document, under each of these topics are about 5 subcategories. Now, what I'd like you to do in your groups is to choose 1 or 2 of those subcategories and think of or explore in your conversation what are some of the emerging technologies you could use to help increase or sustain the impact of a generic organization, or you can pick one within the group if you like. And the idea is you will see in the PDF document under each of those 5 categories, there is basic, intermediate, and advanced. The intent of the exercise is to encourage people to develop or incorporate technology that helps you achieve at least an intermediate, ideally intentionally in the longer run, advanced. Now, if that doesn't make any sense, be sure to come back into the main room. Jess and I'll help answer any questions, and then you can pop back into your breakout room. I will probably come around the 3 rooms over the 10 minutes just to help and see how you're going. So hopefully that makes sense.
Tim, what was the 3 topics? that you
3
mentioned?
topics: IT management, so maximizing value from IT spend; information systems, so this is about efficient processes, services, measured outcomes, so impact measurement, that kind of stuff; and digital marketing. So many not-for-profits and social enterprises are quite familiar with digital marketing. That's electronic data messaging, SMSs, it might be website, it might be, you know, social media, that kind of stuff.
Welcome back, everyone. The stage is yours, Tim.
Thank you, Jess. Welcome back, everyone. We gave you a little bit more time there because I was feeling a bit mean at the beginning of that session. So sorry for giving you a lot of things to think about. What I'd like to do is just go around the 3 rooms and do a very quick summary debrief of what kind of things, you know, maybe the top 3 highlights of what you took out from that conversation. So let's kick off with the digital marketing team. So, because I did briefly go into that room and wow, you were kind of deep in conversation, so I left. So does someone want to talk from digital marketing? Anyone?
Sure.
There we go. Hello, Paul.
Sure. G'day. We were just kind of comparing notes of where each of us was in relation to the 4 categories or the 4 line items that you had. And then if where we are now, where we were likely to be, or how we got around from saying going from one stage to the next level up.
So just for the benefit of the others on the call, can you just read out those 4 categories under digital marketing? Because they may not be familiar with the areas that, you know, I got you to look at.
Okay. Our website, email marketing, social media, and fundraising. Like I said, just I was the head of fundraising, so it's actually good to see it broken up into those different subheadings. So that was really helpful. Yeah, and then you could plot where you were on each of those. So they did not have to be, you didn't have to describe your digital marketing as intermediate. You could really drill down.
Right.
Into.
So were there any examples within the group or ideas of technology or emerging technology that the group could benefit from to help accelerate impact or you know, the organizational goals to move towards the advanced or the intermediate section, to move you further to the right?
Yeah, I might just give one that I did when I was at Cape York Partnership, that the website was is a basic, and it's about to be relaunched and it's likely to be advanced, but that shouldn't stop you from advancing in other categories. So in fundraising, we had no presence, or the website had a donate button that was clunky with no CRM behind it. So we went off-site to Raisely and used a third-party platform that really step changed what we did. And from that, we could then really give ourselves a great presence in our fundraising and then wait for the rest of the website to catch up. So it didn't stall you. And that's grown for us. In our case, I think we've raised about $60,000 or $70,000 off that website.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Yeah, so it's been really exponential, and all our numbers are through the roof, and our social media stuff is really sophisticated. So we're able to bring the bottom 2 sections, social media and fundraising, together, not necessarily wait for the website to be slick.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Paul. IT systems. So someone from that group, if they'd like to jump in and contribute.
Was that not our group?
Candice, that was you, Candice.
Oh, that's us. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Got confused about IT system or information system.
Sorry. My bad.
Yeah. So Michelle and I and this group, and we came from very different organization. Hers has been around for 50 years. So a lot of the items, the score is pretty low at the basic level because it's just the infrastructure is not there and it's difficult to implement change when people has been in the job for 40, 50 years, maybe a little bit less. Versus my organization, it's a startup and it's a digital product and service. So it's actually, for the most part, in terms of service delivery, is quite advanced at about 7 to 8. But when it comes to sort of KPI reporting and impact measurement, that's when the data skill set is scarce and sort of more at the intermediate level, and with HR and finance system is sort of more basic because it's a very small organization at the moment, so it's just Xero.
Right.
And
Oh, Xero's all right. That's I hear stories of people, with a ledger book and pencil. At least you've got it in digital format.
yes.
No, Xero's good. Xero's intermediate.
Oh, okay, then intermediate, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Candice. I'm glad you mentioned data. You might notice there's a theme starting to emerge here. That's the third time I've heard data this morning. So the last group, IT management, would someone like to step up to the mic?
Yeah, Sandeep here from
Hello, Sandeep.
IT. How are you going? I might call in Laura as well, because she also was actually giving her example. And so we essentially chose around the area of data-driven technology solutions and platforms and applied it to IT management. And she was giving an example of financial inclusion in the NF not-profit that she's working in, and I guess more around open banking and allowing people to sort of be more in control of their data, and being able to then look at different options for their financing and lending needs. And from hearing her, and we'll hear her in a second as well, but from what I could see, that she actually had a very good strategy in planning. A lot of it was regulated as well, so that helps, I guess, in terms of ensuring that you have buy-in from stakeholders. And so I would give, from what I heard, her at least an advanced score as well, particularly because, again, she's running or being part of the leadership team. I felt that her platform was, seems to have that executive engagement and potentially staff engagement as well. We probably didn't get time to talk about the IT cost and value and risk management, but I'm sure she'll be able to talk more about it. But that's sort of
thanks, Sandeep.
what I heard. Yeah. Laura, do you have a moment?
Sure. Tim, so basically, I guess the analysis that we've done in our side is that a lot of organizations are using enterprise systems. So they're all kind of doing their own thing in the same way that products were, sold in their own shop in a retail environment. But when you move into digital, there's an opportunity to move from enterprise systems into ecosystems, where if you
so
think
Laura,
about,
for the benefit of the audience, what would they recognize as an enterprise system in a kind of social enterprise? How would they recognize that software?
your email inbox would be an
Email
enterprise
inbox,
system,
right?
right? So that you use it yourself. Now, if you think about an enterprise, an ecosystem, that would be like LinkedIn. Everybody kind of all participates in this ecosystem. And so you then have people contributing towards something. And I guess what we're building is a services ecosystem that allows different organizations to be there and do just their part in helping a consumer buy services. So really what we wanted to do is enable consumers to be digital citizens and participate in tomorrow's digital economy. And in order to do that, because people may not know how to read, write, or use a computer, realistically speaking, the organization that they're interacting with should be able to do everything for you so that you can buy. So and so what we thought about was re-engineering processes completely so that organizations are doing the work and consumers are benefiting. Now, in the services space, because there's a transition of data, like personal information gets exchanged, the only person that owns that data is the consumer. Now, under enterprise systems, consumers give you their data, and then you as an organization own it. So all of these organizations store all of this massive amounts of data, which means that you're subject to privacy and all these other things. But if an ecosystem like ours was operating and organizations came on board, they would help the consumer collate data. The consumer would have their own digital identity, and they would be able to reuse their personal information to buy services.
Yeah.
The organization would, facilitate that and help them. But because the right people are doing the right jobs in this digital ecosystem, you automatically get information, which should not cost you any more and should not be an additional effort to get this information in order for you to understand what's happening in your organization.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. I'm gonna stop you there because I've got probably another half an hour of content to get through. So thank you very much for those three comments. You'll notice that data keeps on coming out in all of these sessions. What I'd like to do now is just go through some of the items that you selected in the Choose Your Own Adventure. And first of all, I'd just like to share some slides here around. Let me just get out of the way and make this full screen. This isn't by any means complete, but this is a slide that I was recommended or asked to include, which is some popular no-code tools that social enterprises and small organizations should or may want to be aware of in order to help accelerate some of their many of them are SaaS products, many of them are Australian, actually, some of them in here. Now, I'd like to really start talking about data in a little bit more detail. So I've got a couple of slides here that may be of interest to the group. Now, I want to try and make this as general as possible. So many of us will be familiar with maybe the Internet Minute. So at the moment within the year 2020, there's an awful lot of data being generated or digital exhaust by us traversing every aspect of our life, whether it's social media, banking, retail purchases, whatever. But only about 2% of this data is collected and retained, but there's an awful lot of information and essentially insights to be gathered from this information. So for example, an organization like TikTok, which is very, very heavy on data and analytics, is building up an amazingly rich picture of behavior, intent, connections and so on, even way more than something like Facebook. So what I'm really trying to do here is shine a light and develop awareness of some of the data that is out there in the broader ecosystem that may be of interest or benefit or potential benefit for small and medium organizations. So one example that many aren't familiar with, and I like to take the opportunity to talk about as often as I can, is the State Library in New South Wales, who about 3 or 4 years ago entered into a collaboration with Data61 and CSIRO here in Sydney. Now, what this social media archive does is it ingests artifacts and tweets and pieces of information from the general networks. About 550,000 artifacts a week are ingested, and it's mapped against a series of word matrix, I suppose, in order to determine an emotional clock for New South Wales. So if you look at the clock on the right-hand side, every 5 minutes, depending on the chatter on the networks, it will determine whether the state of New South Wales is in a state of fear or surprise along that scale. Now, I absolutely love this as an example of using information and data to map to emotion. Now, this isn't directly relevant to the social enterprise space, but what it is a fascinating example of collaboration on ecosystems and data sharing. You can see on the bottom right-hand side is the website to go to if you're interested. Now, if we switch to the social impact community, there's a collaboration with the Centre for Social Impact, UNSW and Swinburne, developing a centre for data and reporting and resources that can be used to help measure and understand the influence and the impact of effort. Now, the idea here is that rather than develop bespoke reporting yourself, there may be or should be items or artifacts that you can benefit from and reuse and help to scale your impact. Now, the SEAL and SEES were only launched, I think, in the last month or so they're relatively new. So I would encourage you to have a look at those and see if they have any benefit or use to you and your organization. Now, I mentioned adoption in the introduction, if we look at the last 110 years or so, the speed at which technology is being adopted is speeding up. So if we look at on the far left-hand side, about 110 years ago, it took about 50 years for new technologies to be adopted by 100% of the population. These days, it takes about 25 years. So the time you have from when things are introduced to when they're fully taken up is now 25 years or less. Now, you may have heard, people use the phrase technology hype. Now, this is actually a well-known phenomenon in the technology community, that expectations at the outset are quite high. Now, if you map this over time, the initial expectation after a period of time when people have an opportunity to test it, to try it, apply it, the disappointment starts to kick in, and then you end up in the chasm or the trough of disillusionment, as it's called here. And then after a period of time, things settle down and people get a bit more familiar with the technology, and then it tends to be plain sailing after that. But what I'd like to, let's just map this to some of the use cases along the curve. So for example, if we start on the far left-hand side, the early adopters of new technologies tend to be research and development, startup, which is when mass media starts to get visibility of this technology and the hype starts to build. And then after people start to have a bit of time to test and try and look under the hood, that's when the negative press starts to appear and the chasm starts to or the disillusionment starts to set in and the chasm starts to trough out. At that point, some providers or suppliers start to consolidate. Some go out of business because they can't sustain it. And then you end up the product being iterated into a second generation. And after that, that's when things start to settle down a bit. And the best practice tends to come about. Now, really, the reason I put this slide in really is so I'm building this, is at what point is it good to take on new technology? Now, we're certainly looking at the mainstream market here, certainly for this audience, where probably the late majority or even the laggards tend to engage or adopt technology. What's really kind of important, though, is that we don't adopt technology, certainly on the far right, where you see the, kind of the star. I've worked with many organizations that adopt technology too late. And if you do after that, kind of star crash thing, you end up adopting products that are no longer supported or in service or maintained. And that can actually expose you to a number of risks, particularly security risks. So getting the timing right is a real challenge. So moving on very, very briefly, I just want to stop here because no one actually voted for this, but I just want to share this slide because I kind of really enjoy it. Now, really, it's mapping innovation and technology, particularly in startups, to individual SDGs. Now, this is a representation of over 2,000 startups. This is global, to each of the 17 SDGs. Now, the wheel on the left is by year founded, from 2005 to 2019. And the wheel on the right is really about maturity. So starting off with nascent, emerging, and mature organizations against each SDG. What's of interest here is that you will see quite a bit of crowding, particularly in the yellow SDG 7, affordable and clean energy. But by the same token, you also see some gaps in some of the other SDGs, which represents an opportunity. Now, there are many millions of dollars invested behind this, this slide. So again, very briefly, just touching on the the global top 40 most innovative companies. You may have seen this or similar. This comes from the Boston Consulting Group, is an annual survey. The two main points I want to make here really are, if you look at the top 10 global most innovative companies, 7 of them are technology companies, and 50% of the top 40 are in America. Now you need to hold that thought, because I need to come back to that on the next slide when we talk about Australia and where we are here. So technology is certainly dominating the most innovative companies globally. Now in Australia, the position is somewhat different. We have a bit of a two-speed situation going on in Australia. So Australia is actually in the top 1 or 2 countries in the world when it comes to adopting new technology. We're very, very quick, particularly around consumer technology, banking, Apple Watches, gizmos, gadgets, whatever. We're very, very quick to adopt new technology. However, when it comes to the mainstream business innovation and enterprise innovation, as a nation, we're very, very average, and that number is actually dropping. So there is this challenge between how we operate as a consumer and how we operate as a business. And there's a call out here, Zena, you might be happy, that reference here to Good Things Foundation. We need to make sure that the technology that we develop and engage with is fully inclusive and mindful of marginalized groups, whether they be aging, disability groups, or others. At the moment, on our current trajectory in Australia, we're actually building ourselves to be a very, very good customer of an app store which is managed in America, which is not very good for the nation as a whole. It's a bit of a risky situation we're in. We have a lot of very, very capable technology resources in Australia, and we need to be a lot more mindful about how we deploy and use them. So just wrapping up on the kind of the talky bit of the workshop. Going forward from this year, there are 5 main themes that technology are going to help elevate and support, and many of these probably won't be much of a surprise to you based on your experiences in the last 12 months around working from home, a transition to more e-health based services, telehealth and such, digital online shopping with e-commerce, online learning, reluctantly or otherwise, and maybe a transition past something that's more student-centered or human-centered in the way it's designed and developed, and then digital government around citizens demanding how they engage with government and at all levels. So what I'd like to do really is summarize the talk before I share some resources that may be of interest to this group. So really the importance of developing a technology strategy to support that of your business is vitally important. Without one, you may struggle or be challenged to realize the strategy of the organization, and also to make sure that you connect with the ecosystem and the broader community who may have experience and resources worthy of sharing. Now, in the slide pack and the replay, there's a whole bunch of resources here, books and podcasts that you may be interested in looking up. There's certainly things that have been very instructive for me. But for those that are in the not-for-profit and social enterprise sector, if you're not familiar with Connecting Up in Adelaide, this is an organisation that has a number of free and low-cost resources around technology that you may want to see if there is anything of benefit for you there. These guys support over 25,000, or in this case, 35,000 not-for-profits across the country that you might want to be taking advantage of. And more recently, this week, Monday, with the help of the Lord Mayor's Foundation, Gandel Philanthropy, and the New South Wales Government, they've launched the not-for-profit Digital Transformation Hub. A replay of that webinar is available on YouTube to watch back. You will see that there's an awful lot of similarity with the 5 areas that you worked on in your groups to map to that resource. Highly recommend you looking that up. What I'd like to do now is just open the floor up to questions. And if anyone's got any questions or comments or feedback, we can spend probably 10 minutes talking about that.
Good question.
Hey, Laura.
Hello. So in terms of, I guess, helping governments, because lots of governments are wanting to go digital, right? In terms of helping governments and getting in front of governments and things like that, like, is there an easier way than, like, knocking on every single door?
From what perspective, Laura? Give me some.
I guess like all of us are social enterprises, and we're all addressing certain different issues. We know that going digital, or government going digital, that means that they have money. So if we're knocking on doors, or hoping to get a slice or be part of that strategy that they're doing moving forward, is there an easier, like, is there a shortcut, or is there no shortcuts to this?
Oh, how would I answer that question? So probably 2 parts to that question. Obviously, it's state specific, I would suggest initially. In New South Wales, I'm reasonably familiar with the Service New South Wales, led by Victor, who I'm sure you're connected with. Seems to be the driving force around the digitising of government services. I'm less familiar at a federal level. At probably the social enterprise level, some on this call may be familiar with the Social Sector Transformation Fund, which was announced in the budget last November, and has recently been writing grants. And I think there are about 800 social enterprises in New South Wales that benefited from that. There's about $50 million that went into that. And the whole purpose or intent of that grant was to support organizations in the transition of their digital capability. Because of COVID, they were kind of left out in the cold, and if at a time when the demand on their services was actually increasing. So that was recognition by the state government to really help organizations lift their game. I did spend probably 5 minutes talking about that in the previous webinar in digital transformation. So if you are interested in that, go and have a look back at the replay there. And there's a couple of slides about the 10 areas that they're supporting in that grant. So that's actually a component of that will be plugged into the Digital Transformation Hub. So these things are starting to get connected. So that would be, it's not a complete answer, Laura, but I think that was probably where I'd go. Yeah. Any other questions? Zena, I'd like to invite you up to the stage just to talk a little bit about Good Things Foundation.
Putting me on the spot there. Thank you for that.
Without notice. So just for the benefit of those that don't know, Zena, can you just give us what is Good Things Foundation? What are some of the challenges that face you, because you deal with technology and inclusion every day, and you're going through quite a challenging time at the moment, where a lot of these services are being digitized, and a lot of society, in your case, or your research suggests 2.5 to 3 million Australians are not currently engaging with technology, and talk about how you're combating some of those challenges.
Interestingly, yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. Interestingly, that stat has now changed, I heard through this week, actually, to saying it's changed from 10% to 1% of the population through COVID. But if you dig deeper into that stat, you will see that the criteria for asking for categorizing someone as being online is anyone who has been online once in the past 3 months, which I don't think is a very difficult thing to do these days, even if you have to go to, Woolies to do your shopping and you have to get onto the QR code. So if it was the only time ever that you logged, you'll be now counted as online, which is really interesting.
So if you go shopping and you happen to use a QR code once to log in 3 months, you're considered digitally included. Is that?
That's the latest data that has come through. I'm using that as an example, but the criteria was having been online once in the past 3 months, which really doesn't show us anything,
Right.
And unfortunately, there are still a lot of people in Australia that not only don't have the skills, but also can't have access or can't afford technology. So there are,
and some of the groups you're talking about are Indigenous and rural and remote. You're talking about aged citizens. You're talking about people with disability, homeless people, people that can't afford a data plan on their mobile phone.
That's correct.
That kind of group?
We consider realistically even people who can only access the internet on their phones are in some ways experiencing data poverty or not optimal access, because we know that it's not it's not a stable a stable connection, or it's not the best method of connection. It doesn't allow you the full range of participation, digital participation, as having a full access to full Wi-Fi would.
Yeah.
So yes, that is still, it's still out there. There's still heaps of people that can't access technology. We do say a large percentage of the population now should be able to use NBN, but it's still being rolled out, and there's a lot of people who are still hesitant to actually adapt that technology. So. It's at Good Things Foundation, we we're a digital or a technology social change company, a national company who have been around for 3 years in Australia, and before that in the UK for about 10 years. We work mainly in the area of digital inclusion. So when we talk about inclusion, there is the question or the topic of access, there's the topic of affordability, and there's a topic of skills. So we mainly are active in the topic of skills. We develop very easy to understand e-learning resources and other resources for people to be able to easily understand technology. One of our most popular courses at the moment still is what is a computer and what is a mouse, so we're talking at that level, and we can understand how overwhelming things can be for people who need information at that level. We have currently we have a B2B model, so we work with a network of 3,500 community organizations across the country. We develop the resources and we train their staff to become digital mentors, and then their staff or their volunteers then go on and work with people in the community to increase their digital literacy skills. We do work with some corporates as well to develop resources for their clients. We worked with NBN and Wesfarmers and some others to sort of see when they come to us and say, oh, this is what we've identified in our cohort of customers, and we develop some resources for them as well. We're looking at how we can expand, obviously, and see how else we can help Australian society, and what else we can be doing there. And we're always looking at collaboration and partnership. So if there's anyone in there who thinks that we can benefit from working with each other, I'd encourage you to get in touch. And yeah, anything else you would like me to talk about?
You also write checks.
Checks.
Don't you write checks for people to buy loan equipment, which might excite people?
Look, we have distributed more than 20 million in grants over the past 4 years.
Yeah,
to give to people, to organizations, to help them with this. So these can be capacity building grants, or buying actually digital devices to then loan out to their clients, or work with their clients in a way to make sure they can access technology.
So an example might be a community library where they have a number of shared resources.
Absolutely.
For you know, a digital club to come together and they learn how to do email or video calling or telehealth or whatever it might be, to build their confidence and.
And look, it's a way of connection. It is interesting to talk about teaching how to use Zoom on Zoom to people who have never even used technology before, but our network partners have had to do that, and we supported them by providing a lot more resources. At the moment, we have a grant round open in New South Wales specifically for people in lockdown to help them with more digital devices, and if there are organizations that need that for their clients, we're more than happy to look into how we can help. So yeah, there's a range of ways we try to address this issue. But I think the biggest issue for us at this moment is that although it's something that we know is alive and well for everyone, especially during this lockdown, it is still quite a low priority issue,
getting digital access or confidence.
Digital skills and access and inclusion, inclusion as a whole. If you look at an analysis of all the topics that are of importance, it's a
long list at the moment, Zena. People have a lot on their mind at the moment.
Exactly. And it's a tiny little amount, but we just looking into the future and the way things are going, we think that we need to actually start addressing that now, because that gap and that digital divide is going to only get bigger, and that will mean that a lot more people, the definition of marginalized populations and marginalized people is going to include people who cannot access technology, and that's going to even increase the level of disadvantage.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that contribution, Zena. That was definitely worth hearing from you on. We have only a couple of more minutes remaining. Do we have anyone else that would like to step up and ask some questions for the group, or maybe some of the topics that were raised today they would like to review or ask questions on? Before I pick on somebody. Chloe, we haven't heard from you today. Let's hear what's on your mind, Chloe. Thank you.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the small groups, for me it's all about systemize, integrate, automate, and scale, and that is really so essential to ensuring that we can deliver a great experience and be really efficient internally. So I've seen COVID as being this great opportunity to just work on it rather than in it, and to just really just sort of revise all the systems, and also in terms of any pivoting that's required, what impact that has on all of the technology requirements. So I've been taking a really broad view of looking at what is my system of systems to find the needs.
Excellent. You've reminded me of a conversation we had in the digital transformation webinar a couple of weeks ago, where we talked a little bit about risk, and last year really propelled a lot of organizations to adopt new technology with little or no due diligence. And as a consequence, now there is a certain amount of risk, increased level of risk buried in organizations because of this quick adoption of technology, that they do need to take a little bit of a pause and review things to make sure there aren't holes in your organization, and particularly when it comes to security. So that's a really important point I just want to dwell on. If you want more information, go back to the replay from the digital transformation, because there was a great dialogue towards the end of the session. Thank you very much, Chloe. Do we have any other final questions before we go to a wrap? No? Okay, Jess, I'm going to throw to you for a wrap.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Thank you so much for sharing such a wonderful conversation around technology and how social enterprises can harness that in this challenging time. So obviously, if you can fill out the feedback survey, that would be much appreciated. We always love to hear from you as to how we can be improving our workshop to support social enterprises and other for-purpose organizations in these challenging times. So before you hop off for lunch, it will be grateful if you can share some of your thoughts. So in relation to the next few workshops in the series, we have next one on the 13th of August on social media for social enterprises. So understand that can be frustrating, takes a lot of time, and if you don't have that skill set in marketing in your enterprise, it can be challenging to know whether it's actually driving results. So yeah, definitely join us. And Adam Long, a member of our Social Impact Hub Professional Impact Network, will be sharing his insights and on how more organizations can be doing wrong when they're coming to social media, and how do we establish a solid presence online. So stay tuned for that, as well as if you'd like to go into other workshop recordings that you haven't checked out in the past as well, they're all on the Social Impact Hub website. But otherwise, that's all from me, and I hope you have a really great Friday and also a great weekend as well. So thanks everyone. See you soon. Bye-bye.